Hey guys, welcome back. We are into mid-October now. So in today's video, I want to talk to you guys about the October lull. A couple things, what is it? Is the October lull even real? And if you are experiencing the October lull, what can you do to get out of it and find some deer? This is the time of year where a lot of hunters, and I see this on social media every season, where they start seeing less and less deer, whether that's from personal observation while they're hunting in the woods or from their trail cameras. They're seeing a decrease in the number of deer pictures on their trail cameras. Or maybe they are still getting pictures of deer on their trail cameras, but instead of having daylight pictures, now most, if not all of those pictures are being taken at night. This is the dreaded October lull, when it seems like deer just disappear in the middle of October. And that's the real summed up version, or the spark notes of the October lull. And every hunter will experience this a little bit differently, but for the most part, I would say that's what it is. Hunters are seeing less deer when they're in the woods, and sometimes they're seeing less deer on their trail cameras, or those pictures, if there are on their cameras, are being taken at night. But is this true? Is the October lull real? Do deer simply disappear in October? Do they stop moving in daylight and only move at night? The answer is no, that's not true. In fact, it's quite the opposite. There have been a lot of studies monitoring collared bucks, and what those studies have shown is deer movement, or I guess in the study, buck movement, steadily increases as we progress through October. So it's actually the opposite of the October lull. Deer movement does not decrease through October, it actually increases throughout the month of October. But what about all those hunters that are seeing less deer each time they go hunting throughout the month of October? Or the guys that are seeing less daylight activity on their trail cameras, mainly nocturnal pictures? I'm here to tell you, two things can be true at the same time. You could be experiencing or seeing less deer when you're going hunting throughout October, while at the same time, deer activity could be picking up, as the month progresses. And there's a couple reasons for this. Why guys could be seeing less deer while at the same time deer movement is increasing. And we're going to talk about three of those reasons in this video. As we push further into fall, and it's going to be a little bit different depending on where you're located in the country, but as we push further into fall, there are a lot of changes taking place in the deer woods. For the last several months, everything has remained mostly consistent. Here in Michigan, I would say that's from the middle to late May all the way until September. Everything is, for the most part, the same in the deer woods. But now that we're into October, in the middle of October, it is not consistent anymore. There are a lot of changes, and this affects deer behavior. The first thing that's really changing for the deer herd right now are their food sources. What they were consuming throughout the summer months, that's either gone or it's going dormant. Here in Michigan, the soybeans, they're turning yellow if they haven't already been combined. So the deer are shifting away from those soybean fields, and they are focusing more on those fall food plots that we planted. And for those of you guys that plant food plots on your property and might be noticing that the deer aren't in them as much right now, that's because there's another change in their food source that happens in mid or early October, and that's acorns are dropping. And that's happening a lot on my property right now. There are so many acorns on the ground right now, and sometimes when there is too much food, there's just an abundance of acorns, it can be more challenging to narrow down or lock in on what the deer are doing, just because they could be anywhere. That's one of the things that's so nice about having food plots on your property, that once those are the preferred food source, you have a very consistent afternoon pattern. But if you have a lot of acorns on your property, that's going to throw a wrench into that afternoon pattern. They're still going to leave their bedding areas and head to a food source, but if you have a lot of oak trees that produced, that food source could be just about anywhere, making it more likely that you're not going to see any deer, because you might not have stands at every oak tree on your property. And even if you did, you'd have to guess the right one. And with these changing food sources this time of year that impacts the deer movement patterns, what can we do as hunters to try to increase our opportunities of getting closer to deer? Try to beat this October lull, or the perceived October lull. And I'll just talk about one way we can do that, and I'll use my property as an example here with the acorns. We have hundreds of oak trees on this property that produce this year. Again, that could mean that's challenging because there's, again, a lot of available food sources. But primarily most of the oaks on my property are red oaks. I have a very few number of white oaks, and this is a white oak behind me right here. This one didn't produce, but I have a couple white oaks in the back of my property about 200 yards north that did produce. And when these acorns are dropping, white oaks are a lot more attractive than red oaks. Red oaks have more tannins in them, so that makes them a little bit more bitter. So right now the deer are walking past thousands of red oak acorns to get to my white oaks. So if I were to go back on my property and hunt those red oak acorns right now, because I know they're dropping right now and deer like acorns, I wouldn't see very many deer. I might see some deer as they pass by and they head to those white oak acorns, and I might be experiencing the October lull. I might be thinking, man, these deer are not here anymore. They disappeared. But really, they are still walking around. They are just consuming the white oaks, which is not where I was sitting. But if I sit near the white oak that's dropping acorns right now, I have a really good chance of seeing deer. So just keep that in mind right now. One of the things that's really changing in the deer woods are their food sources, and you just got to find out what that hot food source is right now, and that's what you need to be targeting in the afternoon. The second thing that's really changing right now as we push into fall or through October is the available cover. Throughout the summer, just like with the food sources, there is a lot of cover that these deer can use. But as we move through October, a lot of these annual grasses start to die back and lay down. These weeds, they die and they start to lay down, and the bushes and the small trees, they start to lose their leaves, which turns an area that used to appear relatively thick into an area that feels wide open, and the deer feel exposed. And so they start shifting into these thicker, high stem count areas as we push further into fall. If you're hunting an area that looks like the timber behind me, wide open hardwoods, and you're noticing that the deer activity is decreasing, you're seeing less deer each time you go out throughout October, one of the reasons might be that the deer just don't feel safe in that area. There is no cover back there. So these deer are gonna leave this area and seek out quality cover to bed down throughout the day. And the further that cover is away from your property, the longer it's gonna take those deer to get to your property. And with these first two changes, that's one of the big reasons why a lot of guys see their bucks leave in the summer, and also a lot of guys start to see new bucks as we start progressing through October. So every area is gonna be a little bit different here with dispersal and losing bucks versus gaining bucks. But this is where having high quality habitat and working on your habitat improvements on your property is so important. We want to give these deer and the bucks every reason to select our property as their fall hangout, so we don't experience that October lull, by giving them high quality cover, high quality food, and keeping our hunting pressure at a minimum. And that's the last big change that I want to talk about that's happening right now in the deer woods. There is a huge increase in hunting pressure, and this greatly impacts deer movement. If you've got good cover on your property or near your property, and you have high quality fall food sources on your property, and you're still seeing that deer activity, daylight deer activity, start to decline as we're pushing into October, each time you hunt, you're seeing less and less deer. Trail cameras are showing less daylight deer. It could be that these deer are sensing the increase in hunting pressure, and this is going to impact their patterns. As I said in the beginning of the video, there have been studies done with collared deer that show deer movement increasing as October progresses. And this is despite all the changes that's going on with the change in food, change in cover, and the increase in hunting pressure. Deer activity still increases throughout the month of October. So if you've been hunting a lot so far in October, and again, you're noticing the deer movement is decreasing, there's a good chance that these deer are feeling the pressure and they're shifting their patterns. They might be taking a different route than they were before. And if this is the case, there's a couple things that we can do to have less of an impact when hunting our properties. And the first one is just to play the wind. We want to try to make sure that we are always blowing our scent downwind of where we think these deer are going to go. We want these deer to be upwind from us. Now, that does not mean that a deer is never going to get downwind of us. This is hunting free-range animals. It's going to happen, but for the most part, you know the area you're hunting. You know how the deer are moving through this area. You want to be approaching from downwind and hunting downwind of how these deer are moving through the area. Hunting downwind of the expected deer movement is going to decrease the chances of these deer winding you, spooking, and altering their patterns. Another thing that we try to do in early to mid-October to make sure that the deer don't change their patterns, and I say this one a lot, but it's because it's important, is that we try to hunt more along the perimeter of our property, closer to our cabin, instead of pushing into the core. We try to hunt less mornings and more afternoons. And it's not that we don't like hunting the core or we don't like hunting mornings. You know, I love hunting mornings. Some of my best hunts have been morning sits. And I also have a lot of great stand locations that are closer to the core of my property, but we don't want to be doing that in early to mid-October because we have an increased chance of spooking deer, which is going to alter their patterns before those higher odds pre-rut sits. So again, another thing we can do to hopefully have less of an impact on our property is hunt those less intrusive stands, limit our morning hunts, and focus more on afternoons in the early part of the season and through mid-October. But just because we're hunting on the perimeter, that doesn't mean we're always hunting the same stand location. We've got quite a few stand locations around the perimeter of our property, so we're always bouncing from stand to stand, again, depending on the wind direction, and this does help spread the pressure out. You're not just saturating one stand location with your scent. You're spreading that out to multiple stand locations around the perimeter of your property, which should have less of an impact on the deer movement. So is the October lull real? Again, two things can be true at the same time. Deer can be moving more throughout the month of October, while at the same time, we might not be seeing those deer. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are so many changes going on in the deer woods right now that we might not be set up where these deer are right now, whether that's the cover that they're focusing on or the food sources that they're traveling to. At the same time, hunting pressure is starting to increase, which is also going to change the patterns of the deer herd. So if we are noticing that we're not seeing as many deer right now, whether that's from hunting or maybe on our trail cameras, that means that we need to adapt. We need to find that hot food source. We need to find the cover that these deer are using right now. We need to maybe find an area of our property that's not being hunted so heavily. Or maybe we have a neighbor that's hunting really hard right now and he's impacting that section of our property. Maybe we need to shift to the other side where these deer might have shifted to. We need to be able to adapt and change our strategy based on what the deer are doing now. But guys, that's going to do it for today's video on the October lull. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.